This is Biochemistry Unfolded, From Atoms to Algorithms, a weekly podcast on the topic of computational biochemistry and biophysics. So, good afternoon, and welcome to the 7th episode of my biochemistry podcast, Biochemistry Unfolded, From Atoms to Algorithms. And so today I thought I would talk about a widely used algorithm, not just in biochemistry, but I think it's revolutionizing business and education and everything. And of course, it is artificial intelligence. And so, of course, what I'm talking about, if you haven't figured out yet, is ChatGPT. And so what is ChatGPT and how can it be used specifically in the field of science to improve your workflow and aid in everything that you do scientifically? So what is ChatGPT? So ChatGPT is a generative artificial intelligence chatbot. It was developed by OpenAI and released on November 30th, 2022. The current version is based on the GPT-4o large language model. And so what ChatGPT, that's a tongue twister, isn't it? So it generates human-like conversational responses, and it enables users to refine and steer a particular conversation towards a desired length, format, style, different level of detail. You can use it for a wide variety of tasks. You can ask it questions, and it actually kind of thinks about that, and it provides different information. Currently, it operates on the freemium model, and so you can access this online and based for free, and that's the free tier. That gives you access to GPT-4o currently. And then there's a paid subscription model, which gives you access to additional features for a number of different reasons. There's also additional features which you can pay for to get image generation through like DALL-E, for example. And so that's also useful as well. So ChatGPT has a wide range of uses. And so I came across a paper in the literature. This is in PLOS Computational Biology. So again, we're interested in seeing what can this do for computational biology, computational chemistry. What can this do for science? Because obviously science is using artificial intelligence models pretty widely. We've talked a lot about AlphaFold, and I think in a recent episode we talked about RF diffusion and designing proteins to treat snake venom. That was very useful. ChatGPT, of course, is just the natural language AI, so it's a little bit different. And so what can we do with ChatGPT? So this particular paper that I came across, it's entitled 10 Quick Tips for Harnessing the Power of ChatGPT in Computational Biology. And the first author on this paper is Tiago Lubiana and Rafael Lopez, Pedro Medeiros. I believe these authors are in Brazil, if I'm correct. Let's just take a look. Yeah, so School of Pharmaceutical Sciences, University of Sao Paulo in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Rafael Lopez is actually at Yale University in New Haven. Yale School of Public Health. So there's an author from the United Kingdom on here, and a couple of other authors as well. So they came up with 10 tips on harnessing the power of ChatGPT in computational biology, and how do we do it. And these are actually pretty good tips overall, because ChatGPT can be used very widely and very effectively in your workflow throughout the day, right? So what did they come up with? So tip number one is embracing the technology and be ready for novelty, right? And so it's evolving very fast. There's a lot of new features, and so learning these new features, don't afraid to be inventive, or don't afraid to just kind of test out what it can do. They actually mention a new partnership between ChatGPT and the popular search engine Wolfram Alpha. And so if you've ever used Wolfram Alpha, that's kind of like a version of Google on steroids, if you will. And so it's got an enormous amount of mathematical and computational capabilities for a variety of apps. And so if you couple ChatGPT with Wolfram Alpha, now you can ask Wolfram Alpha questions in natural language and obtain a pretty effective response. So that's very powerful. And there's a lot of new tools and even new collaborative tools. One of the things, if you haven't noticed, if you've ever used ChatGPT, in the upper right-hand corner, there's actually a little link called Share, and you can share that particular ChatGPT thread with colleagues. And so now you can actually use ChatGPT interactively between multiple people. So that's also very useful. So again, don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to ask it interesting and unique questions, and even simple things. So if we just kind of look at, if I go to ChatGPT right now, and let's ask it a simple question, right? And let's say I want to know, describe the algorithm Rosetta fold and how it can impact protein structure prediction. And I'll just ask it to do that, and then it basically gives me a description of Rosetta fold. It will even tell me how Rosetta fold works. It's three-track network architecture, end-to-end deep learning, application of protein complexes. It gives me a pretty good description on its impact to protein structure prediction, right? Now, let's say I'm not quite as advanced of a user, and I want this dumbed down a little bit. I can say, describe the software Rosetta fold to a 5-year-old. And so now it's going to dumb that down, and it comes up with a slightly more simplified description using the metaphor of imagining a big box of Lego pieces, but you don't have the instructions to build something cool. So Rosetta Fold is like a super smart robot that looks at the pieces and figures out exactly how they should fit together to make a perfect shape, like a castle or a spaceship. But instead of Lego, Rosetta Fold works with tiny building blocks called proteins, which are super important for everything in our bodies, like making our muscles strong or helping us digest food. Scientists use Rosetta Fold to discuss how these proteins should look so they can understand how our bodies work and even help make new medicines. I think even not just a 5-year-old, my cousins in Arizona are a little bit older than 5, but I think they could even understand that. And I think even my mother, who's not a scientist, could probably understand this as well. Now, let's say you're getting ready to go. Let's say you work for a biotech company or going to a meeting, and you're talking about using Rosetta Fold in the next proposal that you're proposing to do, and you're trying to get some funding from executives, right? And So basically what you need to come up with is an executive summary of Rosetta Fold and what it can do to a non-scientist. But literally an executive summary is a very short, non-technical description of something very technical, and you're writing this to somebody to say, hey, this is what the technology can do, and this is why we want to use it, and why we should. Of course, Rosetta Fold is free, so we're not going to be investing in the software, but adding new technology to your workflow is going to require an investment in time to learn to use the software and to learn that. So let's now write another prompt. Write an executive summary of Rosetta Fold, illustrating how it can be used in a proposed project for the computational design of an enzyme for a small biotech company. And then you can even, the more information you give AlphaFold, the better it's actually going to be. So we can also say the executive in question that will be reading this is a 72-year-old baby boomer. No offense, but I just need somebody a little bit older that is not familiar with computer technology and primarily plays solitaire in his free time in Windows. So nothing technical. That's just what I'm trying to get across. So let's just see what ChatGPT comes with here. And so there you can see my prompt on here. We have an executive summary. We have our project overview. It gives him, what's really nice about this is it gives, our biotechnology is embarking on a groundbreaking project to design a novel enzyme with enhanced efficiency and specificity for industrial or pharmaceutical applications. To achieve this, we will leverage Rosetta Fold, a state-of-the-art artificial intelligence-driven software that predicts the 3D structure of proteins with high accuracy. This technology allows us to accelerate enzyme design, reducing costs and development time compared to traditional trial and error methods. This is actually pretty good because it emphasizes reducing costs, and it emphasizes reducing development time, and it tells you really quickly what Rosetta Fold can do in a simple paragraph that's highlighted at the beginning, so the executive can read that very quickly. What is Rosetta Fold? It goes into that. Notice how we've got a lot of bold and a lot of information that's kind of highlighted here. How Rosetta Fold will be used in the project. There are 3 numbered items on there. And then it says, hey, why this matters. Again, we're reducing wastes, costs, and time. And they also highlight, hey, better products and increased revenue. So some executive, they're going to be very focused on that. Reduce costs and increasing revenue because that gives them a lot more money for what they're trying to do, right? And that's basically the bottom line. We want to try and increase and maximize revenue. So ChatGPT can give you a really good executive summary. You can certainly edit this appropriately. And so that's one of the strengths of ChatGPT. So don't be afraid to experiment a little bit. The tip number 2 in this paper, this goes to improving code readability and documentation. ChatGPT is very fluent in a number of programming languages, such as Perl and Python. I think Python is probably used a little bit more commonly today. It's also very fluent in R scripting and C programming. And so you can actually give it several prompts. Tip number 3 kind of goes with writing code efficiently, so we can certainly write code for you. But not only that, they probably should have put tip number 2 after writing code efficiently. But I think what they want to do is highlight that maybe we're still going to be writing our own code, especially if we have a very complicated problem. You can certainly write snippets of code. But more importantly, let's say you're collaborating with a team and one of your colleagues gives you a piece of code, and as is very typical for a lot of scientists, they kind of expect, oh, you know how to read code. You can interpret what I've done, but you don't really know all the variables that they used. So what you want to do is kind of figure that out by reading the comments, but maybe your colleague did not write those comments. So what ChatGPT can do, you can give it that code that was given to you by your colleague, and you can ask it, please write some comments and provide appropriate documentation so that it's easier for someone to interpret what this code does, so that we can understand that. This is also very useful for posting code to GitHub and sharing that with the general community as well. You can also ask it and give it a prompt. They give you an example to write me a standard GitHub README file for the above code. So this can make this can really help the programmers tremendously, and so that's very useful. And not only that, it can write code as well. So it can actually, it's fluent in the code. It can actually write small snippets of code. It can write more complicated things. I wouldn't ask it to write something as complicated as like Microsoft Word or major bits of code, but let's give it an example here. And let's say write a Python script to calculate the GC content of a DNA. Whoops. Write a Python. For some reason, I just deleted what I just wrote. Write a Python script to calculate the GC content of a DNA sequence. And so it will actually give you machine editable code, and you can copy that and cut and paste that into a text file in a Python script and then execute that on your computer. And they even give you an example of the usage. They also kind of show you, hey, this is what our GC content, this is how we calculated it, and how it works. They also provide advocate comments as well too. So it's actually pretty good as a programmer, and it can write code fairly efficiently. One of the things to keep in mind, though, is it's still important to actually know Python or Perl or whatever language that you're using, because it can make mistakes. It's not perfect. Let's say ChatGPT came out in 2022, so as of right now, it's only about 3 years old. For a 3-year-old, it's actually pretty good. I don't know many human 3-year-olds who can write Python or Perl code, but it's pretty good, but it does make mistakes, and so it's not perfect. So you still have to understand the code and how to write it to make sure that you still have to go through a debugging process, right? So that's very, very useful. So I think ChatGPT can certainly provide programmers a lot of useful information right there, right? And next, ChatGPT, so tip number 4 is that you can use ChatGPT to enhance data cleanup. And so this can be really useful for analyzing text files with large amounts of data that bioinformatics and computational chemistry can analyze. Of course, it can analyze the data in a Gaussian output file, and it can quickly find and identify things like the Gibbs energy and other energies as well from a file. It can also analyze the output of any other files as well, and it can be used to write macros for Microsoft Excel. So if you have all of your data in Microsoft Excel, it can write a macro to calculate a statistical mean or a median value, or it can calculate the minimum and maximum, and it can write more complicated macros as needed, right? So this can greatly enhance your ability to analyze large data sets, and it can enhance that information as well. For small data sets, you can clean up data directly in the ChatGPT interface. So you can ask it, act as a table, add a new column with consistent labels to this data set. And then you can ask it to prompt additional data and additional information. So that's very useful. And tip number 5 kind of goes with that. You can actually use ChatGPT to improve your data visualization as well. ChatGPT understands things like ggplot and GNUplot, and it understands Matplotlib. So you can actually use ChatGPT to enhance figures and diagrams. So you could actually, let's see here, here's another example. Write a GNUplot script, and let's put GNUplot right there. So write a GNUplot script to generate the input to read 2 columns of data. The first column has millimoles, millimoles base or NaOH added, and the second plot contains the pH to generate a titration curve for an amino acid. And so it's now going to generate a simple GNUplot script to generate a titration curve for an amino acid. It also gives me some dummy data, I believe, in a TXT file that it's going to actually use as well. Now it doesn't. You can actually add more formatting. You can then use the thread feature and then ask it to modify this with, if you want to increase the font size or if you want to increase other attributes of your image, that's fine. But it gives you an initial one, and here's my sample data file. So it will, and then you can take this code, you can just copy this right to GNUplot, and then you can plot that code right out. So that's very useful if you're generating a titration curve in GNUplot. And so you still should know a little bit how to do things in GNUplot, but it provides things a very useful thing. Now, the other thing it can do with your figures, and this is very important, is it can provide, it can actually improve existing figures, and it can add accessibility features. So, in one example, I've actually worked with a scientist in my past career that was actually totally colorblind, and this person could not see any color whatsoever. And so any figures or any figures that we were publishing we couldn't have color in those figures. We had to use other symbols and other things. And so accessibility is very important to ensure that the maximum number of people can actually read and interpret your data. And so you can actually use ChatGPT to give it one figure and ask it to modify that figure with appropriate features to enhance the accessibility as well. So that's actually very useful, and an eye to accessibility is very important in scientific publishing. They actually reference an article here that's also very good, and that they cite. There's another paper in PLOS Computational Biology by Rougier and coworkers, Rougier, Drotboom, and Bourne, entitled 10 Simple Rules for Better Figures. And so that was published in 2014. They actually mention this paper to read so that you have more information on maximizing your figures, and of course then you can use ChatGPT to enhance those figures based on information that you're already familiar with. So here you're not necessarily utilizing ChatGPT by itself. You're utilizing ChatGPT as well as your own knowledge that you know for making figures better, so that you can maximize your research output and your communications, right? Now, tip number 6 is probably the favorite topic of English departments and colleges and universities, especially with undergraduates, because there's a lot of interest in ChatGPT that it can actually write papers, and so there's a big concern for using ChatGPT for unethical means. So I think what we want to strive here, and they actually mention ethics as well, because again, if you're going to use ChatGPT to improve your writing, one important thing is also to be sure to disclose its usage as a writing tool to prevent any misunderstandings, so that people are aware that you've used ChatGPT, right? So that you're not plagiarizing. So that's very important. Now, we're not necessarily talking about using ChatGPT here to actually write entire papers for you and to plagiarize your work. And what ChatGPT can do, however, is if you have writer's block, or if you're kind of going through existing text, maybe you need some different transitions in your work, you could upload a copy of the text to ChatGPT, just upload a snippet of the paragraph, and then ask it a prompt of, in this paragraph, please provide me some different versions of the following sentence, and or different transitions. And ChatGPT can then provide some different versions as well. So you can kind of use this almost like a thesaurus in a sense, or more likely a thesaurus on steroids, because not just alternative words, but it can come up with alternative phrasing as well. It can also be useful. You could actually cut and paste an entire research report that you've already written, and then you could ask it, please summarize the following text in a 250-word conference abstract, and then it can actually write that abstract for you so that you can then tweak that and rewrite that as well. So that's also pretty useful to enhance, writing those abstract, because it can often be difficult just on our own to come up with an abstract, and different conferences have different abstract requirements. One conference might say, a 500-word or less abstract. Another conference is a 200-word or less abstract. And then you're trying to figure out, what can I delete to make this fit the conference abstract requirements. And so ChatGPT would have that would be a very useful tool to enhance that writing. So as a writing aid, not a replacement for writing, I think that would be very useful. And again, you are encouraged, and it is important to make sure you disclose ChatGPT usage as a writing tool. There have actually been a couple of examples in even, I think, papers with a high impact factor like Nature. There's been some examples where some scientists have submitted papers and they forgot to delete the AI prompts from ChatGPT from their paper, and so you could actually see the AI prompt even in the abstract of one of these papers, and that was rather embarrassing, especially for Nature, that they did not catch that. Usually, Nature is a very high-quality scientific publication, and so it was rather embarrassing to see that. So you do want to try and make sure that you're using AI in a responsible manner. And what I usually do is I usually refer to the Marvel Spider-Man series. And if you remember when Spider-Man first received his powers, recall what Spider-Man's grandfather told him. And so there's a quote, with great power comes great responsibility. And so I think that's an important quote to keep in mind, especially when using ChatGPT and AI models. So you want to keep that in mind. Tip number 7 is ensure you understand or know how to test what ChatGPT generates. So, this is artificial intelligence, and it's not perfect. You are the ultimate intelligent agent, right? You've got education. Many scientists may have a master's degree or a PhD, and that's a lot of education. That's real intelligence that we have. And ChatGPT can make errors. Of course, humans can make errors as well, too, but ChatGPT is simulating how the human mind thinks. And often cases, they actually mention in here, that the authors of this paper, they mention in some cases, ChatGPT may hallucinate or add bugs that can produce silent errors and lead to false conclusions. I love the word hallucinate, because I wonder if they're implying that ChatGPT is hallucinating on acid when it's doing this work. I'm not so sure. I don't know many scientists that use acid when they're actually doing the research. Although I think the inventors of LSD actually did test acid with Bicycle Day, but that's beside the point. But so I just found it amusing they use the word hallucinate. But I think what they're alluding to here is that ChatGPT is not perfect. And so it does make errors, and so we need to use our own education and our own intelligence, our own knowledge about programming, software, techniques, to make sure that ChatGPT gave us information that is actually valid. And so I think that's very important, right? Tip number 8 is learning the basics of prompt engineering design. And so the prompt you give the AI, now this is very important, because the more information that you give to the AI, the better output you're going to get, right? And so if you can write, if you want to know, for example, information about a software suite, GATK, which they mention in the paper here, the bad example would be to say, tell me about GATK, because that doesn't give much information, right? It really lacks a lot of context. It doesn't give you any information about bioinformatics. So it doesn't say, hey, this is a bioinformatics acronym. So when you do a Google search, if you do a Google search for GATK by itself, that doesn't tell you anything, right? It's very vague. What do you want to know about GATK, right? Do you want to know how to use it? Do you want to know what it does? What do you want to know, right? So a very simple 4-word prompt is not going to be very helpful. But a good prompt might be like this, and they give this example in the paper. ChatGPT, I'd like to learn about the use of GATK tools in bioinformatics. Could you provide a brief overview of GATK, its main applications, and some popular tools with the GATK suite that are commonly used in the field of bioinformatics? Please include any advantages and limitations associated with tools. And so that's a much more descriptive prompt. That's going to give ChatGPT everything about what you're asking for and what you need to know, and you're going to get a much more detailed response about the overview, the applications, the tools, the advantages, and even the limitations. So the more information that you provide in a prompt to an AI, and this applies whether you're using ChatGPT or AlphaFold or RF Diffusion, DALL-E, whatever you're using, the more information you provide the AI, the better data you're going to get, right? I think there's an old acronym, GIGO, that goes back to computer science. What does GIGO stand for? Garbage in, garbage out, right? And so that very much applies in this case for AI prompts as well. So consider the prompt very closely. Now, tip number 9 is to consider the GPT API to extend your applications. And so the API is kind of a programming interface that will output very specific parameters for you that you can then use to add those parameters to other applications. And GPI has a very extensive API that can take specific parameters that it outputs and send those directly to other applications. And so that can be very useful to integrate API into your workflow. So that might be something to consider as well. And lastly, tip number 10 is probably the most important. Don't become too dependent on ChatGPT. This kind of goes hand in hand with what I previously said about, artificial intelligence not replacing real intelligence. And this is a game-changing app. It's very powerful. It can provide a lot of information, but it does not substitute your own education, and it does not substitute your own experience. It can provide you snippets of code. It can provide you good code to execute, but you also have to know how that code works, and you also have to know what you want out of that code in order to make sure that you get accurate information out of it. So if you don't know what you want out of the code, it doesn't matter what you ask ChatGPT to give you. If you don't know what you want, it's not going to know what to give you. So that's a major factor that you need to take into account when using ChatGPT. So the overall conclusion is that these large language models, such as ChatGPT, they are powerful tools, and they're becoming essential in the workflow of programmers, scientists, and other professionals, even in the business world. And they improve productivity, and they greatly simplify everything we need to do on a daily basis, right? You do want to keep in mind that they have kind of a note that they are general purpose tools. So, it will provide snippets of code, will provide, really quick information about what you need to do, but if you're working on a project, you're synthesizing different snippets of all that information. And so the task for you is to take the snippets of information that you can obtain from ChatGPT as well as your own experience and put that together to come up with your final product or come up with your final report, write your paper, whatever, right? So don't depend too highly on ChatGPT to do everything for you, right? It's a tool. It's not a replacement for the human experience, right? So I think that's very important to take into account. And so that's basically using AI in a typical workplace. And this could apply not only to science, but it could apply to business or even in personal applications. I think ChatGPT has an iPhone app which you can use as well, so that's very useful. So I hope you found this video today very useful, and I hope I hope you're enjoying these podcasts and enjoying this information. And for now, I will let you go, and I will see you again in the next episode, in episode 8. So thank you for watching. Thank you for watching Biochemistry Unfolded, from atoms to algorithms. If you enjoyed this content, please subscribe to this channel, and we will keep you informed of future episodes. Thank you.